Well, good morning and welcome to another week on the allotment, and please excuse this big lump of wood that I'm drying off in here over the fire. This is a little project I've got ongoing while I wait for the soil to warm up, and it will become more apparent later on. It's frozen out there. I mean, it's a beautiful sunrise, and the ground's frozen, the water butts are frozen. I mean, that's the downside of these beautiful sunny days we're having at the moment is, you know, at night the sky is clear and so everything freezes. So, you know, I'll have to wait a little while. I brought some more broad beans from the greenhouse, and I'm going to plant those in the ground later on today when the soil warms up and softens up a bit. When I get home, I'm going to put one of my gutters, I suspend them off one of the beams on the greenhouse, and I'm going to sort that out. And I have 3. I suspend them on ever longer ropes so that they hang underneath 1, 2, 3. And that's how I grow my peas. And if you watch my channel for a while, you'll have seen how I do that. And it's a very common allotment thing, and I've picked it up from others. So I shall be starting that this week. Those peas will, will germinate in slightly cooler temperatures, and the greenhouse should get them off to a roaring start, I hope. Pea alderman I'm growing, the 6-footer, which we grew last year and was very successful. In fact, we've only just finished eating our frozen peas. My vegetables over the winter, the broccoli or calabrese, cauliflower, French beans, runner beans and peas, I think that's all of them. Of course I've got butternut squash and so on. They have all benefited from being blanched. The first year or two when we froze stuff, I looked online, as I always do, to see how to do things, and people said, oh, you don't need to blanch stuff, and then others said, oh, you must blanch it. Well, we didn't bother, and they were fine. You know, there are no complaints. The only thing that I did find was the broccoli, once it defrosted, was a bit mushy. So the next year we thought, well, let's give it a go. So Cheryl, to her credit, went to all the effort, aided by myself, of blanching stuff, and it did make a difference, especially with the broccoli. That was much firmer once it was cooked, and very tasty. So I would recommend blanching if you do or you don't. We found it benefits. So anyway, on the plot today, I'm doing a bit more firewood. I'm planting the broad beans. During the week, because I knew we had an extended period of dry weather, I spent a lot of time, and it's a boring job, just forking over and loosening up the surface of the beds. I haven't touched the beds over the winter, and they've compacted with the heavy rain we've had, and of course, although my plot didn't flood, there was some surface water on some of the beds. Anyway, I've dug them all over loosely and got a bit of a crumb on the surface. And with the frost and the wind and the dry weather, they're looking a lot better for it. Albeit, I've tried to go no dig, but as you will have seen, I've dug in manure. No dig is an aspiration, not necessarily a reality for me on the plot. So anyway, welcome along. I think again this video will be made up. I shan't be posting this weekend. Just to report back, it's Sunday today and it's a long weekend for me, so I have Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday off. Normally we'd be away in the caravan, but because we can't, my good lady decided that I needed to decorate the bedroom. I allotted the 4 days and it took 2. So I have a very happy wife having a lie-in, a much deserved lie-in this morning in a nicely decorated, well, I say nicely, that's my opinion, bedroom. She's very pleased, and in fact I think it was 2 years ago, she bought new bedding and curtains in the aspiration of having a decorated bedroom. Well, now she has, and last night they all went up and she's as happy as the proverbial. And you know what it's like for a man living with a woman? For a happy life, you need a happy wife. So I have a happy wife this morning, and I'm happy because it only took 2 days and I'm back up the allotment. Hurrah! So those are going in here. Good, well, job done. That's 2, 4, 6, 8 more broad bean plants in the ground. I've got another 8 that are just sticking their heads out in pots in the conservatory, and when I take these empty pots home with me this afternoon, I shall do another sowing, so that hopefully, rather than doing it all at once, I'm slowly learning to stagger things so that the crops come over a longer period and they're more usable rather than a glut. A sure sign of the arrival of spring. Well, I think I'm just about through with all the appropriate funny little stories from my past, and you know, they're interesting to me because they make up my life, and you know, you may or may not find them interesting. If you don't, then you'll have moved on, won't you? But there is one, it's not the most appropriate story for polite company, but I feel it's just about okay. When I was a young sapper commando, I got selected eventually to go on a leadership course, and it's called a Junior NCO's CARDA. And being in the commandos, all these sorts of courses, leadership courses, are more challenging than they would be in a normal unit for obvious reasons. And we were based in Tregantle Fort on the south coast of England, very close to Plymouth, our base. And of course the corporals and the senior NCOs that ran the course were the best of the best. In fact, 3 of the 4 section commanders went on to a full career in the SAS, which gives you an idea of the level of professionalism of these people teaching us. And we had, there was I think it was about an 8-man room in sections. And every morning about 5 o'clock, before we went out for PT, we were told the previous night to be in a particular dress or have some equipment on the bed that would be inspected, and we would be inspected, you know, in the way that soldiers are. So we'd all be stood by our beds, and this particular morning, one of the sappers, each one of us took it in turns to be the room senior. And so you would go around with a clipboard around the room as the corporal inspected each man. And we were always picked up. Nobody was ever satisfactory, and your kit was thrown across the room, and you were given press-ups, and you were told to show your re-parade the following evening. And it, you know, it was all very unpleasant, and it was all part of the process. But this particular fella, who, and I think his name was Dave, but I can't remember his surname. He was a strange chap, very professional. He was a member of the British Army Mountaineering Association. So you come out at about 4 o'clock in the morning to go and get a wash, and he'd be going up the side of this fort. No ropes, nothing, you know, because the granite that formed this fort had enough handholds. And, you know, you'd say, Dave, what are you doing? He says, therapy. He was a strange chap. Anyway, this particular morning, he was there with the clipboard in his best kit. And, you know, he came to the first
the corporal, he walked alongside the corporal and he took notes on what the guys got picked up on. So he's there with this clipboard, standing like this, and the corporal's looking him up and down. And we're all stood, braced to attention, whichever position we are in the room. And when he comes to the first guy, this Dave stood next to the corporal, lifted his clipboard, and his trouser flies were undone, and he was, shall I say, tackle out. Of course, nobody expected this. No, he never warned anybody. So as he lifted his clipboard, the guy stood to attention, you know, out the corner of his eye, caught a sight of what he wasn't expecting, and just burst into laughter. Well, that was not, and of course, the moment he burst into laughter, Dave lowered his clipboard. So the corporal inspecting him had no inkling of what this guy was doing. All he knew was the man in front of him, at this very serious moment, had just burst out laughing in his face. Well, he just went into a fit. And he went around the room, and each time Dave would lift his well, of course, on the other side of the room, you didn't know what the guy was like. You thought, what are you fool, what are you laughing for? We're all going to get a show parade later, which of course we did. And each man in turn, he lifted his clip. Even looking back now, the mixture of emotions of the utter stupidity and ridiculousness of what he was doing, and you couldn't help but laugh. But of course it made a very difficult course even more difficult. And of course each man that the corporal went to, Paul O'Connell was our corporal, and he was a very short man. And if you've ever been in the army or in arduous situations, short men tend to be more challenging, shall we say. They're nastier and meaner. I think it's making up for the lack of height. It's a bit like a terrier dog. And it was a funny situation. But of course, once the corporal left and we had this long list of show parades, we said, Dave, for Christ's sake, don't do that. You know, what are you thinking, you fool? And well, you know what, when the show parade later, he did it again. Oh, it was awful. I mean, luckily, because there's 8 of us in the room, he wasn't in charge for another 8 days, and he didn't do it again. I think he was threatened with some sort of horrendous physical punishment if he did. Anyway, it's something that when I look back, that course was a very hard course. Most of it was based on Dartmoor under tactical situations, because that's where, leadership counts. And there was no fun to be had. But that one little moment, anyway, gives you an idea of the sense of humour of Her Majesty's forces. Well, it's another Sunday morning, another frozen Sunday morning. All the water butts are frozen. We are sort of going backwards a little bit. I did intend on driving my van round for the first time this morning, but I got in the van this morning and the battery's flat. I think, I've had that battery in that van since I bought it in 2007, and it's never let me down until this morning. So it doesn't owe me anything, so I shan't be up here all day because I shall have to go and get myself a new battery. I could try charging it, but I think that would be fruitless. I think, after so many years of reliable use, you just have to cut your losses and bite the bullet. So I shall go and buy a new battery this afternoon, hopefully. But something's been digging in the trough under the covered porch. Who knows? So what am I up here? I've lit the fire. The flag is up. I've got a bit more firewood here to chop. But one of the things I ordered from DT Brown's and has been sat in the garage for a good few weeks now is these 2 bulbs of Solent white garlic, and they need to go in the ground before the end of March. And of course I've got up here this morning and the ground is all frozen, so whether I'll get them in this morning I don't know, but I shall break them down into their individual cloves ready for planting, and we shall see. But as I've said before, and it hasn't changed, you read a seed packet and it says plant February, March. Well, that's a guide, obviously. If the ground is frozen as it is now and the cold weather has has been in place now for about 2 weeks, I think, then obviously that pushes everything back unless you're sowing indoors. So still the main, I mean, I got up here this morning and all the broad beans have limped over in the frost. You know, I'm sure they'll recover come the warmer temperatures as the day rises, but yeah, still the main effort is at home. So I thought we'd cut away now and have a look at what I've got on my windowsills. So sitting on a sunny windowsill is my Brussels sprouts crispus, a new sowing of tomato mountain magic. These are gardener's delight for the greenhouse, and these are the earlier sown mountain magic. They're going to be grown on the allotment outdoors. A not very successful sowing of lettuces. Then there's the collies and the broccoli, and then the 2 lots of sweet pea and my second early Charlotte potatoes chitting. Well, it's still early in the morning, but there's no wind, so I thought I'd take the opportunity. You know, you've seen the plot recently, I know, and there's nothing changed really, but the rhubarb is looking promising for the spring. We'll see how these onions go. I want to put a little bit of fertiliser on the trees. I do keep looking for signs of life on the 2 trees I bought, and there are some the tiniest of little buds. We shall see what happens with those. But moving up the plot, looking very homely up there at the shed. I'm not going to be out too long before I go back in there. The kettle's on the stove, the flag is up, it all looks very smart to my eye. And if and when the sun rises and the temperature does warm, I might be able to work this soil, and I shall just continue raking it. Actually, I watched Cliff from Castle Hill Gardens, his latest post last night, and he's doing exactly the same. In fact, the tool I used, the bent fork, was inspired by his, and I'm doing the same practice. Just when I come up here, just keep running that thing over the soil, keeping it crumbly and breaking it down, and of course this frost will just help that process. It's actually -3 this morning, which is a fairly low temperature for us, being really almost on the coast. So yeah, not a lot else to report, but it's that time when you look at these canes have been sat here all winter, and now finally there are little green buds, and the buds are opening into leaf, and it's just showing that hint of spring. But this cold weather won't let go, and the broad beans look very sorry for themselves, but we shall see. I'm sure they'll perk up. I can tell you, I said before, haven't I, that there's not a lot for me to do on the plot. The weather stays cold, so there's no planting. So when I was up here, I don't know, yesterday, the day before, I painted these raised beds, gave them a lick of paint, as I did the cold frame tops with a bit of white paint I've got, and they look a bit smarter for that. So yeah, it's all looking very good. Yeah, we just need it to warm up. In fact, the weather forecast for Wednesday, as it tends to, because Wednesday's my hard day at work, the forecast is for heavy continual rain all day long. So I think that's when the cold weather breaks.
Well, that's me for another week. Yeah, I'm running out of things to do now. I mean, the firewood I'm chopping, I've got more firewood than I could ever use. That's really an investment in next winter, because you never know where the wood's going to come from. So while you've got it, you've got to process it. So all the firewood is stacked. I've got some in here warming and drying by the fire. I've got 2 crates here that are overflowing. I've got some on the floor down here, and then I've got that whole stack out there, and even that is overflowing and is cascading down onto the slab. So maybe it's not a bad thing that it's still cold, so I can use some of it. But yeah, I've got more wood than I need. Thanks to Terry for dropping off some as he does his house clearances and whatever it is he's doing. If he sees something that's worth having, he drops it off for me, so I appreciate that. I've painted the raised beds, I've painted the cold frame lids. Everything is, the grass was cut this week when it was a bit warmer. I was going to cut the central and the communal areas today, and I may still do that as the frost thaws. But anyway, yeah, I'm desperate now for the weather to break and for the warmer, for the soil to be warmed, because I can't really use the greenhouse at the moment because the temperatures at night are so low that nothing would germinate in there, and if it did, the seedlings would be hammered by the frosts. So I'm just hanging on now, waiting for the warmer weather to arrive, when we can really get into the serious business of sowing seeds and getting everything ready. So thanks for joining me, and all being well, I shall be around next weekend. Look after yourselves, take care, bye for now.